Oke, selamat sore teman-teman. Kita tiba di titik puncak bincang penulis Authors Forum Jakarta International Literary Festival 2025. Inilah sesi penutup kita panel ke-9. Ada 3 panel yang dihadirkan selama 3 hari berturut-turut. Nah, tema terakhir kita berjudul Solidarity on Political Text. Ini agaknya ingin menganjurkan bahwa membaca itu adalah tindakan politis. Kalau kita simak perkembangan terakhir ini ya, polisi menyita ada banyak buku gitu ya, boleh jadi anjuran itu makin benar. Nah teman-teman, membaca dengan kritis yang dilakukan juga terhadap karya-karya kritis merupakan upaya agar kita tidak masuk dalam perangkap narasi-narasi dominan. Nah ini yang akan kita bahas pada sore ini. Segera saya undang moderator kita, dosen Fakultas Ilmu Pengetahuan Budaya Universitas Indonesia yang juga anggota Komite Film Dewan Kesenian Jakarta, Syuri Mariasi Jeti Tambunan. Oke. Kemudian saya panggilkan pembicara kita yang pertama Anthony Lowenstein, silakan. Berikutnya Bapak Neymar Farid, silakan Pak. Dan yang ketiga Raisa Kamila. Baik. Mbak Betty, waktu dan tempat dipersilakan.
Okay, thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this last session of the Authors Forum. I'm going to speak in English, but I might switch to Indonesian a bit if I forget to say something in English. But the presenters will be probably speaking in Indonesian or in English. So this is a multi-language session, okay? So, welcome to this session. I will start by introducing our 3 speakers, and then we're going to move into the presentation from all the speakers, okay? The first speaker is Anthony Lowenstein. I have to ask him how to pronounce his last name because he's from German. I don't want to say the wrong name. Sorry. Anthony is an independent Australian-German journalist, best-selling author and filmmaker. He's also the co-founder of Declassified Australia. Anthony has written for outlets like The Guardian, New York Times, and the New York Review of Books. His books include the global bestseller The Palestine Laboratory, which has also been adapted into a podcast and an award-winning film series, and has just been published in Indonesia by Margin Kiri. Anthony's other works include Pills, Powder, and Smoke, Disaster Capitalism, My Israel Question, After Zionism, One State for Israel and Palestine, as well as Al Jazeera English films such as West Africa's Opioid Crisis, Under the Cover of COVID, and Germany's Israel Obsession. The next one is Hilmar Farid, Mas Fai, as I have to call him that, is an Indonesian historian and cultural bureaucrat. He earned his bachelor's degree in history from Universitas Indonesia and completed his doctoral studies at the National University of Singapore with a dissertation titled Rewriting the Nation, Pramudia and the Politics of Decolonization. From 2015 to 2024, he served as the Director General of Culture at Indonesia's Ministry of Education, Culture, Research, and Technology. He also previously served as chair of the supervisory board of the State Printing Corporation and as president commissioner of Balai Pustaka. In 2024, he founded Jalin Indonesia, an initiative dedicated to cultural work. And then we have Raisa Kamila. Raisa is an author and historian. Her work explores space and the history of infrastructure and sensory perception academically through historical research and experimentally through fiction writing. Alongside raising her children and completing her doctoral studies, Raisa has co-organized the community reading club Arisan Buku in Banda Aceh since 2018. Her published works of fiction include Perkara Keramat and Cerita dari Sebelah Masjid Raya. So let's give a big round of applause for our speakers. So we're going to start by each speaker presenting what they want to say. And then afterwards, so we will start with Anthony, and then Mas Fai, okay, and then Raisa will be the last one. And then we're going to have a discussion. I will have some questions for the speakers. And then if you have questions, of course, you can also ask them after that. Okay, so I will give the floor now to Anthony.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you all for coming. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the way I see, I'm a journalist, independent investigative journalist, the importance of investigative journalists and the work that we do as resistance, especially in a time of, well, genocide in Palestine, war beyond, growing authoritarianism, including here in Indonesia, and why I think it's never been more important to have those kinds of voices existing. I've been a journalist for over 20 years. I'm from Australia. You can probably tell my accent. And yes, I am, for better or worse, sometimes better. But spent a lot of time over the last 20 years working in various other countries. So in 2015, I was based in South Sudan in Africa. Between 2016 and 2020, I was based in Palestine as a journalist. And a lot of my work in the last 20 years has, yes, involved Palestine, which I'll get to in a minute, but also other work such as the US occupation of Afghanistan, the war on drugs. I've done a book and a film on disaster capitalism, people making money from misery, which could be from mining or the aid industry or war. And in all those works, I like to think, and obviously others can judge, but I like to think that in all those works, and could be books or films, podcasts, I've tried to give a voice to people often didn't have one. And I am very acutely aware of my background, my privilege, my history, my present reality compared to so many other people around the world. I mean, the history of my own family is not particularly fantastic. We, like most Jewish people, I am Jewish, which I'll get to in a minute as well. But the majority of my family were killed in the Holocaust by the Nazis. The ones who got out escaped and made it to US, UK, and Australia, which is why I'm living in Australia. They came in 1939. So when that family arrived, they didn't have much with them, of course. They came as refugees, basically. So that history is a very common Jewish one. And when I was born in the mid-70s, it certainly was seen as, so I was told by my family, by my parents, by extended family, that we should support Israel. That because of our history, because of the fact that our families were killed, that it made sense as a Jew to support Israel. And for those who don't know, as a Jew, I can go to Israel tomorrow, and if I can prove, so to speak, my Judaism, I can become a citizen. To be clear, I am not a citizen of Israel, but in theory I could. I don't do it for political and moral reasons, because I think it's outrageous that a Palestinian who has, frankly, far more connection to the land than me does not have that same right. So he or she cannot go to Palestine tomorrow and become a citizen, whereas a Jew can. So when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of knowledge about this issue, but as time went on, it seemed to me something didn't quite sit right, that there was something unjust about the tribal nature of what I was hearing in my family, in the Jewish community, in synagogues. I was never religious, but in that community, which was this deep antipathy, racism towards Arabs, towards Muslims, towards Palestinians. And it's something that struck me as wrong. I didn't have the language to understand that, I guess, when I was 15. But by the time I finished school, it changed, and I became far more knowledgeable about the situation. And again, a lot of my work over the years has been about trying to articulate why there is a desperate need in the 21st century for a different Jewish identity, which is not solely tied to Israel. And although it might be obvious to an audience here that Judaism and Zionism are not the same thing, for those who don't know the difference, Judaism, of course, is the religion. You are Jewish, you're born Jewish, or you convert. Zionism, obviously, is the belief. I mean, I think there's different ways to define it, but Zionism can be the belief of a Jewish homeland somewhere. It is currently in Palestine and was built on the backs and ashes of Palestinian bodies, and that's still the case where we are today. So the idea that Jewish identity should be so closely tied to that seems to me, in the past, but certainly now, utterly immoral. And considering what we've just been witnessing, all of us, for the last 2+ years after October 7, the genocide, the mass starvation, the rape, the horrendous attacks by Israel on Palestinians, principally in Gaza, but certainly beyond. The idea that our identity as Jews should be closely tied to that is utterly beyond the pale to me and unacceptable. And if there's ever a silver lining in what's happened in the last 2 years, there's a growing number of Jews around the world who share that view. I'm not saying we're always the majority, but there's a growing number of Jews who say, not in my name, essentially, that we are not going to be so closely tied to an Israeli state that proudly discriminates and kills Arabs, Palestinians, Muslims, and also Christians. So one of the things that has often animated me over the years is two things. One, my journalism has not only been about being Jewish, not at all. I've done some work around that question, talking about how there's historically often been a very vibrant Jewish community of dissent. Much of that has been silenced since 1945, the end of World War II, for reasons that make sense to an extent, but it's been transferred to a blind support for a state. And we are told as Jews that somehow is what keeps us safe. Whereas the reality, the clear reality, is that if you are a Jew today, it is more unsafe to be a Jew in Israel than anywhere else in the world. This doesn't minimize anti-Semitism that exists. It exists in the world. I'm not denying that for a second. But the fact is that it's more unsafe to be a Jew there, and Israeli actions are making that worse for all of us. So my desire, my writing, my work on this question is not simply about Jews. It's about safety for all of us means ending oppression for everybody. And until Palestinians are free, whatever that freedom looks like, whatever that political reality is, one state, two state, in my view it should be one state, democratic state for all. That's ultimately a decision for people in the Middle East to make, not me, but my personal view is one state. The idea somehow that there is a moment where us as Jews should be silent in this, where Israel claims to speak for us. I mean, this is what Israel does. Netanyahu is not my prime minister, I can assure you, but he regularly says, almost like, I am king of the Jews. He might not use those terms, but that's basically what he says. It'd be like saying, Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia saying, I'm the king of the Muslims because I'm the leader of Saudi Arabia. Now, maybe some Muslims believe that, but that's clearly absurd. He's a horrendous dictator who shouldn't lead anything, in my view. But nonetheless, this is the desperate need for a different Jewish space. So when I talk about, as I have in my latest book, The Palestine Laboratory, I'll just give a very, very brief rundown. I'm going to stop in a minute. The Palestine Laboratory, which is basically looking at how Israel uses the occupied Palestinian territories as a testing ground for new weapons and surveillance technology, which they then sell around the world as so-called battle-tested. And it's sold to huge amounts of countries, including Indonesia. And as I've been saying the last few days since being here, the flirtation by your current president with the potential of opening up normal relations with Israel after the last 2 years, A, is a disgrace, and secondly, says all you need to know about how many nations, including Muslim majority nations, view Palestinians. So I guess I would close with the fact that our identities, I don't think about I don't wake up every day and say, I'm a proud Jew. Believe me, I don't do that, especially in the last 2 years. But at the same time, I think it's vital to articulate, especially to an audience in Indonesia, a majority Muslim country, that there are many, many Jews who are utterly disgusted with what is going on, and we are trying to change not just what's happening in the Middle East, but the perception of Jews that we're not all committed to endless occupation of Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. So let's give a big applause for Anthony. So we'll now move on to Mas Fai.
Silakan, Mas Fai.
Okay.
Yeah.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk a bit about text or political text. And normally, if we talk about political text, then we would focus on what it says. I'm going to shift a bit our attention to how it is being said. And I think the materiality of political text is equally important as its content. right? Anthony, we had a discussion 2 days ago about this book, and I think it's a very important book. And I think if you're familiar with names like Mahmoud Darwish, a great Palestinian poet, so during my years studying history and literature, I get acquainted with names like Kensar Wiba, Ogi Wationgo, and all these like great literary writers. And the more I read them, the more I realize that that materiality or the material aspect of political text is also very important. So I did my PhD on Pramudia. I'm quite sure you're familiar with that name, and also his works, the Buddha Quartet. And what struck me during doing that research on his novels is the way they've actually created and later produced, distributed, and also recepted by the audience. So I thought that this entire biography of the book is also very important. Yeah. And yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then also to reflect on current political texts, because now we have quite an interesting landscape. Yeah, it has changed altogether. Printed books are still there, and we do love books, but more and more our attention is now directed to audiovisual content and how it would affect the fate of political texts today. So back to the Buddha Quartet. Pramudia actually started that entire project back in the 1950s, when he was kind of frustrated with literary writings. He was fed up with all these like niceties, statics and all that. And he thought that he needed something more historical. So that would contribute to the Indonesian nation much more than just like writing quote unquote normal literature. So that was his ambition at that time. We know that he did the research for more or less like 10 years and then created a number of great works like the biographies of Kartini, and then a series of articles in the cultural page named Lentera of the daily Bintang Timur and so on. So he actually wrote already a lot about what later became subject of the Buddha Quartet. We know he was arrested in October 1965. He spent like 4 years in different prisons here in Java, was not able to write at all. He was not allowed to touch a pen, paper. He had nothing basically for 4 years. Yeah. And then he was sent to the Buru Island. Yeah, he was imprisoned there, and he was again forced labor, etc., for another 4 years. So 8 years totally. He had no connection whatsoever with paper, ink, pen, and so on. Right? And then he was allowed finally in 1973 to write something. But he was not free to do that, of course. Yeah, he was like supervised, and then guards would come to his cell. It was not a cell. It was like a place where he stayed. Yeah, and asked him to write their biographies. Yeah, soldiers wanting, or love letters to their lovers in Java. Also, that was his role as a pujangga. That's how they called him in the prison camp. And only in 1975, so practically 10 years after that, he wrote the famous Buddha Quartet, yeah, based on memory alone. Yeah. And before that, for 3 or 4 years, he actually told the stories orally to his fellow prisoners at that time. And it was like, it was a very complex creation, yeah, of them. So as we know later on, to make a long story short, the text or the manuscripts were smothered out. That's another problem, right? I mean, if you talked about political texts, then how to get these manuscripts out of Pulau Guru, out of the Buru Island to Jakarta, okay? He was released in 1979. He was among the most stubborn prisoners, so he was the last to be released in December 1979. And then when he back in Jakarta, he met with Yusuf Isa, fellow prisoner, and Hashim Rahman decided to publish the books, right? 2 years after that, they managed, 1 year after that, they actually managed to do that under very difficult conditions. No money, They were ex-political prisoners. There's a clear regulation they were not allowed to do anything really to the public. Yeah, so no writing, teaching, publishing, yeah, let alone publishing such a book. But they did it anyway. Yeah, so they got it published, and then it was like, the initial reception was very good. It had good reviews from Compass, all the national journals, etc. Intellectuals praised him highly, etc. So that was good. Yeah, until it was banned, like a few months later. And the reason for that banning was also kind of like curious. I always said, like, if you find, for example, Jacques Derrida difficult, you should try the Attorney General's logic. You know, that's even more convoluted, so to say. So it was banned, and the reason for that, the only reason that I can think of, is that because he is a political prisoner. Because nothing in that novel, I think, would suggest that he's sending secret messages of communism or anything like that. So the only reason, because he was a political prisoner, so his status was actually the reason of the banning of his books. It didn't stop him from writing, from continuing to publish the book. He got all the manuscripts with him, so he published the second volume, the third volume, and then after that in 1990. So he basically defied, the regulations, banning, etc., etc. And what made it possible for him to do it was no other than support from lots of people. Yeah, starting from his fellow prisoner who helped him to publish the book, the distributors. Yeah, the book was banned, so it took some risk. I mean, you had to take some risk, to get the book at the time. My first encounter with the book, because my father brought it home. Yeah, my father was kind of liberal. He didn't care, banning, whatever. No, so he just bought it and then brought it back. But in 1985, I remember when the third volume was published, he actually sent me, to Pasar Senen, that was the bookshop of Hasta Mitra at that time, to buy one volume. Yeah, so he actually sent me to do that risk. Without me knowing, of course. No, it was like 1985. I was still in high school. Yeah, I was more interested in bicycle and motorcycles and basketball. Yeah, so I had the slightest idea about what it was about. But yeah, so imagine that thousands, tens of thousands, of people took that risk to be part of that community of readers. And it lasted for like a whole entire decade. 1980, 1990, the last volume was published. And even after that, people still read it, and there were arrests. If you remember, there were 3 people arrested in Yogyakarta because they were selling Rumah Kaca, the last volume, and they got 8 years for imprisonment, like that. So people actually took risk, to be part of that reading community. So this, I think, is also very important to understand the life of political texts. It's not only the content, but it's also about the materiality of the text. And fast forward to today. So today probably there isn't much risk in reading books like that. Pramudia, for example, but although still I was in Blora during his centenary. And the region that the Bupati wants to name the street after Pramudia, Jalan Pramudiana Tur. And the idea was rejected by an anti-communist youth organization, Pemuda Pancasila. So, and what was ironic is that 3 months after that incident, the leader of that group, who rejected that idea, was arrested by the police, for forgery, for nothing to relate to it. Here you can see a real problem for us even today, right? If they think that you are categorized as communist or terrorist or whatever, is considered against the law that anyone of any moral and political stature can actually exclude you. Yeah. So this is the problem, I think, a real problem. And I think for today, if you talk about solidarity and political text, keep that in mind. Yeah. That the strategy that has been used for decades, the pariahization, you are make a political pariah. Yeah. And once you have that status, that you have no rights whatsoever. Yeah. So my message to you today is to liberate, at least in our minds, yeah, from that kind of classification. Read whatever you think is important, meaningful to you, and build your own understanding about reality. Don't let others tell you what to read or what not to read. Yeah. So, and I think that would be the basis of real solidarity and future of political text. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to go to Raisa, and Raisa is going to present in Indonesian, right? Okay.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you excuse me to speak in Bahasa Indonesia. I just arrived 2 days ago directly from the rainforest in South Aceh, so my brain is working a little bit, difficult. So yeah, I'll be reading this essay that I made.
Kindly request back a little mix of Bahasa and English.
I will try. but yeah, I think there's this equipment that you can use.
Announce where to find the Zoom.
Oh ya, kan panitia boleh tolong dipasang lagi link ke Zoom-nya. And you can ask for, yes. But you need to go to this link in your cell phone. Yeah.
I'm sorry for the trouble.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, so I just prepared this one text only in Bahasa Indonesia, so I will read it for everyone here because I don't really have anything
Yeah, sure.
to share. No problem. But yeah, please bear with me. Boleh mulai?
Ya, silakan. Ya.
So this is a text that I wrote about. So it's my reflections about the very word solidarity, the kind of gesture, the kind of act that we call solidarity, and why and how I think it is important to write something about it, not only as something political, but as something that is emotional, as something that we can feel, we can share the feeling, the burdens with one another. So the title is Adakah Aroma Roti dalam Dunia yang Mati Rasa? Berselang beberapa bulan setelah bencana tsunami di tahun 2004, aroma roti hangat pernah menguar setiap sore di kota Banda Aceh. Roti-roti ini berbentuk bulat panjang dan dipanggang oleh para pekerja kemanusiaan asal Turki di oven darurat selama masa rehabilitasi dan rekonstruksi berlangsung. Setiap sore, di sekitar kawasan Lung Bata, akan tampak pemandangan orang-orang yang mengantri berjam-jam di bawah matahari, menunggu dengan sabar sesuatu yang sebagian besar dari mereka belum pernah cicipi sebelumnya. Dari sekian banyak hal tentang hari-hari setelah bencana tsunami, aroma roti itu salah satu ingatan yang paling melekat kuat. Saat itu, saya berusia 14 tahun, hanya memikirkan tekstur roti yang keras, bukan tangan-tangan yang setiap hari menguleni adonan bagi orang-orang yang tidak mereka kenal. Saya juga sibuk berceletuk tentang rasanya yang hambar, tanpa menyadari bahwa memberi makan dan membersamai yang luka mungkin adalah isyarat paling tua dari kemanusiaan. Lucunya, meski banyak orang-orang seumuran saya waktu itu punya pikiran yang sama, setiap sore tetap saja kami memutuskan untuk keluar dari tenda pengungsian, dari rumah saudara, dari tempat tinggal sementara untuk berdiri bersama-sama mengantri roti. Seperti roti itu, setiap bentuk kepedulian juga membawa kita bergerak bersama, melampaui bahasa, asal-usul, dan jarak antar manusia. Terkait hal ini, ada sebuah cerita populer yang sering dikaitkan dengan antropolog Margaret Mead. Konon Mead pernah ditanya oleh mahasiswanya, apa tanda-tanda awal dari lahirnya peradaban? Lalu Mead menunjuk pada tulang paha dan melanjutkan jawabannya. Tulang paha manusia yang patah dan telah sembuh adalah tanda bahwa seseorang telah merawat orang lain cukup lama hingga tulang itu pulih. Persoalan apakah Mead benar-benar pernah mengucapkannya atau tidak ada yang tahu pasti, karena catatan tertulisnya tidak pernah ditemukan. Namun, cerita itu terus beredar, berpindah dari satu ruang kelas ke ruang kelas lainnya, dari satu esai ke esai lainnya, agaknya karena ia menyentuh sesuatu yang ingin sama-sama kita yakini, bahwa kepedulian, bukan penaklukan, adalah awal dari kemanusiaan. Seperti halnya roti yang tidak bisa dinikmati, namun tetap dinanti, barangkali cerita Mead itu terus beredar bukan karena kebenarannya secara arkeologis, melainkan karena adanya keinginan untuk percaya bahwa sebelum senjata pertama, ada tangan-tangan yang membersamai, bahwa sebelum monumen dan prasasti pertama, ada tubuh yang menyembuhkan tubuh lainnya. Gagasan tentang asal-usul peradaban manusia yang berawal dari kerja perawatan, bukan penaklukan, juga muncul dalam tulisan Ursula K. Le Guin yang berjudul The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction. Dalam esainya itu, Le Guin membayangkan bahwa perkakas pertama, ciptaan manusia bukanlah tombak, melainkan suatu wadah. Bisa jadi kantong, anyaman, atau bejana yang menampung hasil panen dan menjaganya agar tetap utuh. Jika cerita Mead mengingatkan kita pada tubuh yang sembuh, cerita Le Guin mengingatkan pada tangan yang membawa. Keduanya menandakan bahwa gerak awal manusia bukanlah pembangunan pilar-pilar atau perang, melainkan care work atau kerja perawatan. Tindakan yang terasa sepele tapi membuat hidup terus berjalan. Dari dua cerita itu, saya belajar memaknai ulang ingatan tentang aroma roti pada hari-hari rehabilitasi dan rekonstruksi pasca tsunami. Saat ini, saya mengenang aroma roti yang mengambang di udara, melewati reruntuhan rumah, dan puing-puing yang tersisa dari bencana sebagai isyarat bahwa hidup tengah pelan-pelan pulih dan bermula kembali. Mungkin, seperti halnya roti itu, kata-kata juga membawa kehangatan dan ketekunan yang sama, yang menyimpan cara manusia saling merawat. Di konteks Nusantara, dalam bahasa Melayu lama, pernah ada satu kata yang terkait dengan cerita-cerita ini, yaitu nuraga. Berasal dari bahasa Sanskerta anuraga, kata ini berarti kasih, pengabdian, kehangatan yang mengikat satu makhluk dengan makhluk lainnya. Kini, dalam Kamus Besar Bahasa Indonesia, kata itu dicatat sebagai kata arkaik, yang berarti dianggap punah dari penggunaan lisan maupun tulisan penutur bahasa Indonesia. Ketika berbicara tentang perasaan senasib sepenanggungan, kata nuraga terdengar asing. Kita lebih akrab dengan kata solidaritas, kata yang berakar dari bahasa Latin solidus, yang berarti kuat, utuh, terpaut bersama. Kata solidaritas datang kepada penutur Melayu pasar pada suatu masa yang penting. Masa perlawanan anti kolonial, masa awal kehadiran serikat buruh, dan aliansi antar-bangsa. Ia lahir dari perjuangan dan sampai kini tetap menjadi bahasa perlawanan. Namun nuraga menyimpan sesuatu yang tidak dimiliki oleh solidaritas. Jika solidaritas mengandaikan kebersamaan yang lahir dari struktur nan kokoh, nuraga terasa mengalir di dalam tubuh. Tapi, saya sedang tidak ingin mengajukan pertanyaan tentang kata mana yang lebih baik, solidaritas atau nuraga, melainkan, mengapa kata nuraga menjadi arkaik? Dan apa artinya hal itu pada cara kita membayangkan rasa peduli, empati, dan membersamai orang lain hari ini. Kata nuraga menghilang dari penuturan kita, barangkali ketika kata nuraga menghilang dari penuturan kita, barangkali kita juga kehilangan bahasa kasih pada sesama. Bentuk solidaritas yang bermula bukan dari ideologi, melainkan dari getaran tubuh. Memikirkan kembali nuraga bisa jadi adalah cara belajar kembali untuk menanggung, memikul, menggendong, membersamai dan menemani. Akar katanya, raga, berarti tubuh dalam bahasa Indonesia. Yang secara kebetulan dalam bahasa Aceh juga berarti pembawa, wadah yang menanggung dan mengemban. Di dalamnya tersimpan isyarat untuk merawat tubuh sebagai bejana dan tubuh yang saling membawa. Dalam bahasa Inggris, frasa belas kasih dimaknai sebagai compassion, yang saya bayangkan sebagai tindakan yang bermula dari tubuh, dari getaran yang muncul ketika kita menyaksikan penderitaan orang lain. Kata compassion ini berasal dari bahasa Latin, prefix com yang berarti bersama, dan akar kata pati yang berarti menderita, alias menderita bersama. Ia rapuh, intim, dan hampir naluriah. Sementara solidaritas yang terjemahannya sama, nyaris dalam berbagai bahasa, muncul ketika perasaan menderita bersama berubah menjadi struktur dan menemukan bentuknya dalam ketahanan, dalam komitmen, dan dalam berdiri berdampingan. Namun di antara keduanya, ada ruang yang tersembunyi oleh bahasa, ruang yang lebih sunyi dari dunia yang lebih tua. Jika kompati ikut merasa dan solidus ikut berdiri, maka menurut saya nuraga adalah ikut menanggung. Ia muncul setelah gelombang empati pertama, ketika tubuh memilih untuk tetap tinggal, mengangkat, dan menjaga. Ia adalah belas kasih yang bertahan cukup lama hingga menjadi solidaritas, dan solidaritas penuh kasih yang cukup lembut untuk tetap bisa merasa dan membersamai. Hari ini, kita menyaksikan berbagai luka, kekerasan, dan penderitaan secara langsung. Perang di Gaza, Rakhine, Papua, dan Sudan sudah kita baca tidak lagi di buku sejarah, tidak lagi kita tonton melalui reportase saluran televisi seminggu sekali, melainkan real time di layar ponsel kita. Kita scrolling, kita menonton, kita berduka, dan seringkali merasa bingung karena rasa-rasanya tak banyak yang bisa kita lakukan. Seperti halnya ponsel di masa kini, di masa lalu mesin cetak, kamera, berita kawat, dan radio adalah teknologi yang memperantarai orang-orang di berbagai belahan bumi. Cerita-cerita yang terekam secara lisan, tulisan, dan citraan bisa menggerakkan orang untuk saling terhubung dan membangun solidaritas. Tapi ketika teknologi sudah semakin canggih, ketika kita sudah begitu terbiasa dibanjiri citra derita dan luka bertubi-tubi hingga mati rasa, apa artinya saling menanggung, merawat luka, dan membersamai orang lain ketika mata kita sudah jenuh? Apakah belas kasih dapat bertahan di tengah keterpaparan yang tanpa jeda? Apakah solidaritas akan tampak berbeda jika tragedi tak terus beredar di hadapan kita? Barangkali bercerita tentang kelembutan dan kepedulian juga adalah cara untuk melawan. Di tengah dunia yang terus memaparkan kekerasan, menolak mati rasa adalah bentuk perlawanan itu sendiri. Disinilah nuraga dapat ditemukan hari ini, dalam setiap upaya memperpanjang rasa peduli melalui tubuh, melalui tangan yang membawa, punggung yang menanggung, kulit yang merasakan. Seringkali tangan-tangan itu dimiliki oleh mereka yang bukan pahlawan dalam cerita-cerita revolusi, bencana, atau pejuang kemerdekaan. Seperti perempuan yang menanak nasi di dapur umum, relawan yang membersihkan reruntuhan, anak-anak yang menemani satu sama lain. Dalam diri mereka, nuraga bukan sekedar perasaan, tapi tindakan sehari-hari yang menegaskan martabat manusia. Solidaritas, dengan demikian, tidak berhenti pada ide atau seruan, tapi mengalir di antara nafas dan gerak kecil keseharian. Ia lahir bersama kepekaan dan keberanian untuk mengasah rasa, meski dunia mengajarkan sebaliknya. Jika solidaritas memberi kita bahasa atau perjuangan politik, mungkin nuraga memberi kita bahasa untuk kasih dan kesediaan untuk hadir meringankan derita dan kesakitan orang lain. Keduanya tidak saling meniadakan, justru saling melengkapi. Yang satu membangun gerakan, sementara yang lain menjaga kemanusiaannya. Berbicara tentang nuraga bagi saya adalah mengingat tubuh sebagai bejana pertama bagi belas kasih, yakni raga yang membawa, tangan yang memberi makan, dan rangkulan yang menerima. Mengingat bahwa kemanusiaan bermula ketika seseorang cukup peduli untuk menanggung yang lain. Tulang paha yang sembuh, roti yang dibagi, dan cerita-cerita yang kita terima dan rawat dalam ingatan. Terima kasih.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect ending for the discussion here today. So thank you so much, Raisa, for that. So today we have heard the three speakers talk. Everyone talk about political texts in such in an all-encompassing way. Political text dengan cara yang sangat luas gitu ya, tidak pemikiran sempit bahwa teks itu adalah karya saja gitu. But political texts here are being interpreted as how even writing, reading, or distributing the text itself is a political act. So, for example, Anthony reminds us about being a part of a community, in a sense, the Jewish diaspora. It carries historical and moral questions about identity, accountability, and also solidarity. It challenges us to disentangle the idea of the collective identity of being Jewish in this time and era from state action, while actively resisting oppression, but also being able to foster inclusive and human-centered communities. Masfire draws our attention to the material life of the text, of the political text, and the infrastructure that enables political reading and writing. So it's not just about writing political text, it's about how political text can be distributed, can be read collectively. So political texts are not just messages, they are methods that gather people into collective practices. The politics of a text are enacted through circulation, annotation, and even the creation of spaces like what we're doing today, having discussions on political texts. Raisa emphasized that the notion of care are intertwined with the idea of solidarity, compassion, and she highlights the concept of nuraga, which is now an archaic, and we should bring it up again, so it should not be archaic anymore, right? So Raisa invites us to relearn what it means to care. So she talks about how nuraga embodies care. The first vessel of compassion, of us caring about people, is in our body. It exists in our body. So it is the body that carries, and I'm translating here from her writing, this is not my words, it's the body that carries, the hands that feed, the embrace that receives. So it's a very enlightening 3 speeches. And last night I was struggling really hard to find one question, and I can ask all 3 of you, but I should start somewhere. So I actually have a question for each one of you, but I think I'm going to give that opportunity to the floor. But before we go into the question answer from the audience, I have a question for all 3 of you, leading into what Raisa was saying. So Raisa was saying, we now live in such an intensely mediated world where everything political has the risk of numbing us because it's so intensified. Like the Palestine stories, it's everywhere in our social media feed. And at certain point, probably we tend to feel, okay, it's a part of our everyday life. So it's no longer fostering feelings of empathy, resilience, and all of that because it is so intensive. And that, I think, is the risk of political text in today's era. Like my friend was saying, if it's printed books, you read it when you have time to read it. But social media, everything, the text that we see in the digital world is so intensified. So I was thinking, after hearing each other's reflection, as authors yourself, how does this affect your own writing process? How can we see in what ways political text in today's situation can still sustain empathy and even foster resilience?
Small questions.
Sorry.
No, it's important. Really important. I mean, one of the things that I think is so difficult for a lot of people to hold on to is actually having empathy. Now, I think on one level, being a human should, in theory, be empathetic towards someone, your family, a loved one, at least, you'd hope, unless the family's terrible, in which case they deserve not to be treated nicely, but, in general. But I think one of the challenges that a lot of people have in journalism, I guess I can speak to that as a writer and a non-fiction author, is that we are confronted day in, day out by many in the political space and media space who are proud of their cruelty. Now, that could be anything from Trump enjoying the fact that he's sending Venezuelan refugees and migrants to El Salvador who are literally being tortured and raped, to Australia, sending our refugees to Papua New Guinea and Nauru, who often are killed and raped and mistreated as well. Cruelty is the point. And for so many in the political and media class, that's what they want. They want you in the public to not have empathy for a refugee, for a migrant, for a Muslim from God knows where. And the challenge, I think, that I find is that, yes, in the last 2 years since October 7 and the genocide in Gaza, there has been a massive global interest and public outcry of the horrific situation that Palestinians are in, that Israel's inflicting, backed by many in the West, supported, armed and funded by the West. And the challenge we have now is translating that public outcry to political action. So you do have in the US, UK, much of Europe, Australia, massive public protests, unprecedented on this question. And yet, every single, mostly, a few exceptions, most Western political leaders ignore that and continue supporting blindly what Israel is doing for a range of reasons. And that's the challenge that we have. So we're supposed to it's almost like we're being told, ignore what you're seeing on social media. It's more complicated. Sure, it might look like mass killing, but actually it's whatever the bullshit reason that we're told. And I think that finally is leading to more and more people disengaging from mainstream politics in some cases and disengaging from mainstream media, rightly so, because much of the mainstream media in the West has been an utter disgrace in the last 2 years, with some exceptions. And therefore independent media has never been more important to sort of provide voices to whether it's Palestinians or others. In Indonesians' case, that would be the marginalised, West Papuans, whoever it may be. Those outlets need to be supported, because if we rely on the mainstream press alone, their interest mostly is supporting power. That's been the case forever, and it continues the case today.
Thank you so much. So maybe Mas Pai would like to...
Yeah, I do agree with Anthony, and I think one of the reasons or the problems that we have today is that you simply have too much to follow, right? You get overwhelmed by all these like news, etc., up to a point where you get numb. Yeah, and this numbness is actually what explains the political inertia that we have today, the global level. Yeah, that allows regimes like Netanyahu, Trump, anyone. Yeah, these like populist authoritarian Prabowo. Yes. Thank you, Andrew.
Pleasure.
Yeah, your words, not mine. So the rise of this like populist authoritarian leaders, what would be the counter to that? In my own experience, I use computers for sure, right? AI sometimes, but I found it like increasingly difficult because you always want to cope with that development. You want to be as fast as the news, right? You want to respond to that. You want to put it on your social media, whatever. No, and now I begin to I'd like to begin to think to slow down a bit, right? And a good I think a way to do it is to write with your hands, not with your computer. So turn off your computer, like stay away from your phone, and then use your morning. I usually do that in the morning. That's very wonderful. Yeah, I found it like a few months ago now. I found it really, really therapeutic in a way, right? Because then you get released, you stay away a bit from that, and then you manage to organize your thoughts, your ideas, to reflect more because your hands is slow and my handwriting is very bad because like decades of not writing with my hands. So going back to that, I think is one way of doing that. And another thing is also to reconnect with people. Yeah, and I'm really, I think Indonesia, we're still like this. I mean, you show up in numbers. There's an event, you meet your dear friends, and then have like social meetings and all that. It's very important. Nongkrong is very important. Yeah, you should do that more with your friends, right? Don't just like get to conferences, do all these meaningful things, right? Yeah, really enjoy your time being with others, no? Because that would help you to slow down, to reconnect with real things in life. And I think that's very important in a world that moves so fast. Yeah, and we don't know where it's actually heading to. Yeah, and one way of finding it out is to slow down and then talk to others. Yeah, create meanings together.
Thank you so much, Mas Pak. Okay, stop. The next is Indonesian.
Okay, I will follow up about nongkrong.
Yeah, and I think conferences are also nongkrong, just in an academic way. Defending myself.
Ya, tapi serius, nongkrong itu adalah menurut saya tuh cara untuk menumbuhkan harapan radical hope. Jadi 2 minggu lalu saya baca satu artikel ditulis sama Mbak Yatun Sastra tentang gerakan protes anak-anak muda gitu di Indonesia, dan sangat penuh dengan radical hope karena digerakkan bukan di ideologi gitu, tapi karena ada sesuatu yang meresahkan dan mereka nggak mau terus-terusan hidup dalam dunia yang menyebalkan gitu. Nah, sebenarnya saya tuh balik lagi ke nongkrong, saya tuh ingat tahun 2018 saya lulus S2 di Belanda, saya pulang ke Aceh karena nggak ada pilihan lain. Karena saya kuliah sejarah, mau kerja apa sih sejarawan gitu ya. Mas Fai. Jadi dia gue dia. I'm in Jawa. No, I mean like seriously. I was 2018 masih muda, belum senior Mas Fai ya. Jadi pulang. Let me continue.
I think this is the highlight of the session.
Jadi pulang ke Aceh, saya tuh berjuang sangat keras untuk keluar dari Aceh. Saya dari SD gitu ya, waktu pertama kali mengalami saya lahir besar di Aceh, melihat berbagai perubahan, konflik, tsunami, syariah gitu. Saya melihat itu dan saya sadar dari awal saya nggak mau besar di tempat ini gitu. Saya tidak mau tumbuh di tempat ini karena saya seperti tidak dikasih pilihan untuk berharap tentang saya pengen jadi seniman, saya pengen jadi filmmaker, saya pengen jadi sastrawan. Itu di sekitar saya nggak ada, itu apaan tuh aneh gitu, nggak berguna, nggak ada dunia. Jadi saya mau bebas gitu, saya mau menulis, saya mau melakukan hal-hal yang menurut saya seru gitu. Jadi saya berusaha sangat keras untuk bisa keluar, saya cari beasiswa, saya daftar kampus apapun, saya baca buku, saya nitip ke orang lain supaya saya bisa tahu ada dunia di luar sana yang saya bisa bebas gitu. Dan waktu saya harus kembali ke Aceh 2018, itu tuh sebelum pemilu 2019. Sangat menyebalkan ya. Kita semua ingat betapa menyebalkannya pemilu 2019. Teman-teman saya yang waktu itu sudah lulus kuliah, sebagian besar itu nyalek gitu, teman-teman di Banda Aceh. Masuk political party, terus yang tidak masuk political party sudah jadi PNS, yang tidak jadi PNS sudah jadi ibu rumah tangga gitu. Jadi saya waktu itu memutuskan saya akan kerja di NGO, yaitu di Kontras Aceh. Karena saya kuliah sejarah, saya merasa saya punya tanggung jawab untuk melakukan sesuatu tentang sejarah Aceh nih gitu ya. Saya pengen Truth and Reconciliation Commission di Aceh itu jalan gitu, KKR Aceh itu jalan. Tapi pada kenyataannya nggak jalan sampai hari ini gitu, dan itu sangat menyebalkan. Jadi semua harapan-harapan itu hancur gitu ya. Saya pengen punya teman ngobrol, nggak ada. Saya pengen balik melakukan sesuatu, nggak bisa gitu. Dan saya tetap kerja pun gajinya nggak sampai UMR gitu. Jadi berbagai hal ini membuat saya tuh ngerasa saya ngapain sih gitu, ngapain saya capek segala macam tuh nggak ada guna gitu. Nah kemudian yang membuat saya bisa bertahan sampai hari ini di Banda Aceh itu adalah saya nongkrong sama teman-teman arisan buku. Nah arisan buku ini mulainya dari Twitter. Kita tuh ada anak muda yang sama kayak saya tadi, yang nggak mau jadi PNS, nggak mau buru-buru nikah, nggak tertarik juga sama politik elektoral gitu ya. Dan kita tuh bertemu untuk membahas buku-buku yang kita baca, bukan untuk menjadi si paling tahu, tapi untuk cerita aja, untuk cerita bahwa aku baca buku ini. Dan dulu belum ada Gramedia di Banda Aceh, jadi kita beli buku tuh niat banget tuh, kayak harus just tip, harus beli di all shop gitu ya. Dan waktu kita ngebahas buku, kita tuh nggak ngebahas isinya, tapi buku ini aku fotokopi, buku ini tuh aku dapet dari temen, buku ini aku nemu di terminal gitu. Jadi kita membahas dari mana kita dapat buku, kita bicara soal akses, kita bicara tentang bagaimana pengalaman membaca kita kayak bukunya boring gitu. Terus yang lain bisa bilang mungkin kamu nggak terbiasa baca buku sejarah, jadi kita tuh bertukar informasi itu ya. Dan awalnya itu hanya 5 orang, 6 orang gitu ya. Yang datang abang-abang suster. Abang ini perawat gitu, perawat di rumah sakit, tapi dia seneng baca. Kaget juga kayak, loh abang perawat, bisa nyuntik orang gitu ya. Ngapain di sini gitu. Tapi ternyata dari masih muda dia tuh anak pang gitu. Tapi gak ada pilihan loh. Untuk bertahan hidup, Hop. Teman-teman ingat tahun 2011 itu anak-anak pang di Aceh pernah digundulin, ditangkap sama polisi. Jadi cara dia untuk bisa tetap hidup di sana harus jadi suster gitu ya, perawat gitu, dan dia tetap membaca buku-buku pang zin gitu ya. Masih sering ikut tuh waktu itu. Ada kakak-kakak dia kerja di Bapeda gitu ya, tapi dia paling suka baca buku cerita anak karena dia boring banget dengar apa istilah-istilah teknokrat gitu ya. Jadi untuk membuat dia merasa tetap grounded, tetap apa imajinatif, oke dengan baca buku anak-anak, dan dia niat gitu karena gajinya gede ya di Bapeda ya. Dia beli buku tuh dari luar gitu, ke Kinokuniya, ke Malaysia. Kakak ini kian sih, kakaknya keren, hai kak. Terus jadi dan saya tak kenal, sebagian besar dari mereka saya nggak kenal gitu, karena kami terhubung lewat Twitter gitu. Jadi di sini kita bisa lihat sebenarnya teknologi itu bisa memperantarai orang-orang yang nggak saling kenal tapi sharing the same hope, the same anxiety. Dan di situ tuh kita memutuskan kayak kata Mas Fai tadi, bertemu, kita lepas dari digital, kita analog, kita ketemu, duduk, ngobrol gitu, ngobrol langsung. Dan di tengah-tengah ngobrolin buku kita juga ngata-ngatain pemerintah, misalnya curhat tentang kehidupan pribadi gitu. Dan saya tuh setelah itu kan pulang pergi dari bandara, saya menikah, saya pindah balik lagi, dan selalu pulang pergi. Dan anehnya arisan buku ini bertahan gitu. Saya bingung gitu, kenapa ya? Apakah memang kita tuh memang butuh oase gitu ya, untuk sama-sama minum air, sama-sama aduh kering banget di tenggorokan gitu, harus glek gitu. Jadi pertemuannya tuh tetap berjalan 2 minggu sekali, nggak ada ketua, nggak ada struktur organisasi, nggak ada ADART, nggak pernah jadi underbow partai gitu ya. Jadi dan saya sangat bersyukur sih ada kegiatan nongkrong seperti itu yang membuat saya tuh mungkin nggak bisa langsung membayangkan oh dunia akan lebih baik gitu. Apalagi kalau teman-teman tinggal di Banda Aceh itu atau kayak Kaida di Aceh Timur yang kayak aduh sangat tidak inspiring gitu ya. Nah tadi kerja sebagai PNS ya kak, ingin menghancurkan dunia gitu ya. Tapi punya keinginan untuk bangun tidur setiap hari itu tuh sesuatu yang harus kita perjuangkan banget gitu. Jadi melihat dunia yang semakin gak jelas, saya tuh ingat ya saya harus ketemu orang, harus berpikir bukan berpikir mungkin, tapi berimajinasi bersama itu tentang dunia lain yang mungkin ada, mungkin nggak di hidup saya sekarang, tapi mungkin di hidup-hidup yang lain gitu ya. Jadi gitu sih, nongkrong sebagai methods.
Oke, thank you Raisa. Oke, baik. Sekarang saya akan buka kesempatan. I'll open the opportunity for the audience here to ask question. I see a lot of hands are raised, but we're gonna start with 3 questions. Kita akan mulai dengan 3 pertanyaan. I will choose from zone. From that zone, one, yeah, you, and then from here, sorry, I have to give to the audience. If we have time, I'll give you time to ask question, yeah, and then from here, yeah, okay. So we have 3. We can start. I think we can start from here karena mic-nya nyampe ke sana agak lama. Nanti kita kan dari yang dekat dulu. Boleh perkenalkan nama, and please make the question short so we can have more time for the answers. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Permisi, my name is Auf. So I have a question for Raisa Camila about, I'm pretty interested in your beautifully written words about Nuraga, and I'm curious, where did you find that word? Like probably a manuscript or what? I want to search, by the way. Okay.
Thank you so much for that really important question. Okay. So we can go here. Yeah.
Makasih, nama saya Adi. Pak Fai, saya pengen tanya. Jadi saya baru membaca Bumi Manusia itu pas puasa kemarin. Jadi saya baca Perkara Keramat dulu, baru membaca Bumi Manusia. Jadi Jadi buat saya Raisa itu mendahului Pram buat saya. Jadi, nah, nah, pada saat saya baca Bumi Manusia itu saya bingung Pak Fai karena buset ini di mana bahaya laten komunisnya gitu loh. Maksudnya itu sama sekali nggak ada komunisnya gitu loh. Saya jadi pengen tahu Pak Fai, apakah rezim Orba itu melarang Bumi Manusia itu karena pramnya, karena penulisnya yang which is itu ad hominem kan, bukan karena karyanya kan? Atau memang ada yang ditakutkan dari materi Bumi Manusia itu Pak Fai? Makasih.
Oke, terima kasih. Last one?
Ya, perkenalkan saya Pramudia.
Oh,
Apa yang dibicarakan?
oh ya? Wow.
Tapi saya Pramudia A Krishna, bukan
Oke,
A.
oke.
Sama Pramudia A. Ya, oke.
Silakan.
Itu beban buat saya. Ya, jika berbicara soal solidaritas, bangsa kita itu adalah bangsa yang cukup solidaritas, apalagi jika berbicara soal Palestina. Sepertinya hampir sebagian besarnya mendukung kemerdekaan Palestina. Tapi saya melihat entah saya mengatakannya sebagai standar ganda solidaritas atau standar ganda kemanusiaan, berbeda halnya dengan apa yang terjadi di Papua. Banyak juga yang melihat apa yang terjadi di Papua, apa yang diperjuangkan oleh masyarakat Papua, bangsa Papua itu adalah sebagai terorisme, KKB atau pengkhianatan terhadap bangsa dan lain-lain lah. Yang jadi pertanyaan mungkin buat Mas Antoni adalah apakah apakah standar ganda itu terjadi juga di bangsa lain atau mungkin di Australia atau di bangsa lainnya berdasarkan pengalaman jurnalistiknya? Dan untuk Mas Fai atau Mbak Raisa, sebetulnya kenapa sih kita mengalami hal fenomena tersebut, standar ganda tersebut?
Okay, thank you very much. Very good question. So we have questions for all the speakers. I'm giving you the freedom. Who wants to answer first, or should I be the Oh, okay. Sorry, Anthony. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I see double standards. Yes, massive double standards. And really, that double standard, I think, comes down to one thing. It is, in relation to Palestine at least, it's because much of the West, Western politicians, many Western journalists, many editors, don't think Muslim life is worth it. It's cheap. So if there's 60, 70, 80, 90, 100,000 Palestinians dead, which is what it is, that is somehow seen as expendable, as, well, it's just life. It's complicated. It's a war. I guarantee if there was 70, 80,000 Jews who potentially were being killed, the West would intervene. It wouldn't happen in the modern era. Obviously, it's happened in the past, but it would not happen. And I think the way that that hypocrisy is seen by so many people around the world, certainly in the global south it's seen, it's certainly seen in much of the West as well, that the way that we want to apply justice, we are very quick in the West to say we should put on trial Vladimir Putin or African dictators. I've got no problem with that at all. And yet somehow when it comes to putting on trial for war crimes, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, John Howard, former Prime Minister of Australia, Tony Blair, Netanyahu, the West loses its mind. I mean, last year when the ICC, International Criminal Court, put out arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, the former Israeli defense minister, I remember an editorial in the Washington Post, which essentially said, I'm paraphrasing, this court is not for us. This is a court for those people. For the, for the global south. When they do bad things, not for us. Us meaning the West. Us meaning Israelis or Americans, right? And that sort of, apart from the profound racism, it's just, it means that those institutions are crumbling. How can they not? I'm talking about as a legal institution and media institutions, because people see that hypocrisy. They see it. And they're looking for alternatives, and sadly often they grab onto people like a Donald Trump in America who gives certainly people of, well, in the US's case, certainly economic insecurity or racial insecurity, he gives them simple answers. It's the migrants' fault. We have to get rid of all the migrants. Or, I mean, Americans economically are suffering more now than before he took office, by the way. They are not doing any better. Surprise, surprise. Whether that's going to change how they vote next election, if there is one, who knows. But, you know, the far-right populist sells bullshit. And sadly, because our media often plays into that, they are selling the same line, and that's a problem. And that's why our job is to push back against it.
Okay, thank you so much, Anthony. So maybe we can go to 5, and then we go to Raisa. Oh yeah, okay.
Ya, menjawab pertanyaan yang tadi dulu ya, saya nambahin dari Anthony ya. Dia baru luncurkan bukunya, Palestine Laboratory, dan saya kira salah satu yang penting dari buku itu menunjukkan ekonomi dari pendudukan. Ya. Dan jadi karena kalau misalnya kita selalu memberikan penjelasan moral, grafik dan segala macam, kayak kita agak miss satu poin penting gitu ya, bahwa ada ekonomi di balik ini. Ya. Dan lihat misalnya kamu bicara soal Papua, Aceh juga. Ya. Ya, dulu kita mengangkat Aceh dan Papua. Tapi kalau kita lihat Indonesia hari ini, itu semakin nampak. Ya, Halmahera sekarang jadi program. Sulawesi Tengah sekarang jadi program. Tiba-tiba ada juga perlawanan terhadap dan problem yang kurang lebih sama seperti yang terjadi di situ. Dan kalau misalnya kita perhatikan yang mengikat, memang tadi ya, perluasan dari industri ekstraktif. Ya, apakah itu tambang, apakah itu perkebunan, dan seterusnya gitu. Yang menurut tema saya, logik yang tadi yang dipakai gitu, senang tanahnya nggak senang orangnya. Ya kan, mau ambil isinya nggak peduli siapa yang ada di sana gitu kan. Dan betul-betul hanya dikalkulasi sebagai expendable, bisa diabaikan gitu ya. Jadi itu soal yang saya kira penting ya untuk diingat saban kali kita bicara mengenai itu, karena elemen ekonomi ini seringkali luput ya dari bicaraan kita. Tadi ya soal bagaimana, apa sih yang ada di pikiran Orde Baru ya ketika melarang Pramudia. Menurut saya antara kombinasi ketidakmengertian dengan nafsu ingin mengontrol, dan tidak ada yang lebih berbahaya dari itu. Kenapa? Karena kalau misalnya kamu mau mengontrol, kamu mengerti apa yang jadi soal. Dan ya oke, kamu juga tahu ya bagaimana harus resist dan segala macam, mungkin hukum berbicara dan seterusnya. Tapi kamu berhadapan di sini dengan sesuatu yang sebenarnya nggak tahu juga apa yang dia mau larang. Buku itu ketika keluar, ya diluncurkan bulan Agustus. Bumi Manusia itu Agustus 1980 pertama kali keluar. Dan ya tentu kemudian Hasta Mitra waktu itu, Hashim Rahman dan Yusuf Isa punya cara lah ya, mereka kemudian bawa bukunya ke Wakil Presiden. Ada Malik waktu itu ya. Kemudian serahkan bukunya, ada Malik ya, wah bagus sekali, ini penting banget untuk bangsa dan seterusnya. Wakil Presiden, ya bukan orang sembarang gitu ya. Dan kemudian tentu di bawahnya juga, oh ya ini harus kita sambut dan seterusnya. Sampai kemudian kira-kira bulan September, 1 bulan kemudian semua berubah pikiran. Ya, kenapa? Karena buku ini kemudian dalam waktu kurang dari 1 bulan sudah dicetak ulang sekian kali, ya dan jumlahnya sudah sampai belasan ribu eksemplar. Satu capaian mungkin sebagai buku yang, apalagi buku sastra gitu yang agak langka di masa itu ya. Masa sekarang juga. Nah, dan saya kira itu yang kemudian membuat ya, otoritas pada saat itu mulai berpikir, ini ada apa? Kok tiba-tiba orang ini baru keluar dari penjara, belum ada 1 tahun dia keluar dari penjara, mampu menerbitkan buku, dapat perhatian begitu luas, ya ada yang salah di sini. Tapi mereka nggak bisa tunjuk apa kesalahannya. Satu-satunya kesalahannya adalah mendapat banyak perhatian. Oke? Jadi satu-satunya yang harus mereka lakukan, bagaimana caranya orang tidak lagi memperhatikan buku itu. Nyatakan dia terlarang, dilarang distribusikan, ambil semua dari percetakan dan seterusnya. Gitu. Dan itu saya kira yang menjelaskan ya seperti yang saya bilang, kalau kamu baca alasan resminya itu sulit kita mengerti. Misalnya dikatakan gitu ya, mengapa dia dilarang? Apa sih yang ada di dalam buku itu? Digambarkan ada tokoh yang namanya Robert Surhoff ya di dalam novel itu. Gitu. temannya Mingge ini, dan kerjanya pokoknya menjelek-jelekan Mingge lah gitu ya, sehingga dia nggak bisa jadi dengan analis lah, kurang lebih begitu. Yang kisah cinta biasa kan. Terus bilang inilah karakter orang-orang komunis. Terus saya juga observasi, oke, ini kayaknya di dalam semua novel ya ada orang ya kan, orang yang menjengkelkan gitu ya, kemudian mengganggu dan seterusnya, tokoh antagonis gitu ya, dan sangat simpel. Jadi percuma ya kalau ngikutin jalur itu terus berusaha mengerti, itu kita akan apa namanya kehilangan jejak ya. Saya kira yang paling penting adalah memahami bahwa buku ini menarik perhatian, dan pemerintah saat itu sangat tidak suka ya, orang yang sudah mereka aniaya, mereka buang, mereka singkirkan dari buku sejarah, mereka udah apa namanya dia singkirkan dari kehidupan publik gitu. Ketika dia kembali dalam waktu kurang dari setahun, tiba-tiba mendapat ya kalau zaman sekarang viral ya, dan yang menulis review yang sangat buruk ya, dalam arti betul menjelekkan orangnya bukan isinya, itu konsep orang-orang yang ya di dalam kehidupan sastra dan pers itu terhormat. Wadaku ya, cari sendiri.
Dikasih PR ya sama
Februari mudah-mudahan udah terbit kalau bisa.
Oke, thank you so much Mas Pai. Kaisa mau ngomentarin double standard tadi? Oke, langsung aja. Oke, ya.
Ya, Nuraga itu saya nggak baca dari manuskrip, Kak. Tapi ada teman baru punya anak, terus saya tanya namanya apa gitu. Namanya siapa? Namanya Nuraga. Terus saya tanya artinya apa gitu. Sudah jelasin. Kebetulan teman saya ini memang kuliahnya bahasa gitu ya, TESOL. Hai Icem. Nah dia waktu itu cerita, terus saya penasaran, kayak saya nggak pernah dengar tuh Nuraga dalam bahasa Indonesia. Terus dia bilang, oh iya memang itu kata arkaik, makanya saya mau pakai gitu, karena nggak ada yang sama. Ya biasa lah ibu-ibu ya, nggak mau anaknya tuh namanya sama dengan anak manapun di dunia gitu ya. Jadi dia nyari kata yang paling paling udah punah gitu. Nah jadi saya penasaran, saya cari tahu, terus saya ngerasa kayak loh kok bisa kata ini hilang gitu. Kata itu konsep ya gitu. Jadi kalau kata itu hilang, konsep itu nggak ada berarti. Kenapa gitu? Jadi saya habis ketemu dia, habis akikahan ya. Terus jadi malah nyari tahu, dan pas lagi ada submission untuk ini, saya malah nulis ini aja gitu. Maaf lah inspiring.
No, it is really inspiring. So we can find words basically in our everyday life, right? Okay. So we have time maybe for 2 questions. I already promised you 1 question and 1 more from here.
Selamat malam. Assalamualaikum. I am Ananta Kumar Giri from India, a visiting fellow with International Islamic Institute. Thank you, 3 of you. Terima kasih. Beginning with Raisha, thank you. Now this journey with words, what you call as archaic, so one important political work is how do we do not only linguistic work but also time work, a new kind of temporal work, and related to what Hilmar was saying, slowing down as a way of discovering a new kind of temporality where the hidden resources are becoming alive. And that is related to my second question quickly is, it is in that context, care for example, yes, care is important, but there is also limits to care. So therefore, as a woman, you would realize that. So how do we realize the limits to care as a way not to set limitation, but create kind of practical transcendence? And my final query is that in this meditation on political text, what is the limits of the political? Because the questions that we are struggling with, for example, it borders relationship with the spiritual, like your work, Anthony, how do we craft a non-identitarian identity, which is not just a political work, going back to Jewish prayer in all traditions. So we need to bring the political and the spiritual in a new way beyond the conventional logic of political theology.
Okay, so 1 more question.
Halo, nama saya Isadora dari Prancis. Saya peneliti dan penerjemah. I'm from France. I'm a researcher and I make some research about Indonesian literature. I have two questions, maybe for Ilmar and yang lain. The first is, apakah hari ini masih berbahaya menurut kalian kalau kita membaca Wiji Tukul? Karena kita sering bicara tentang pramuja, tapi gimana kalau tentang puisi Indonesia? Dan yang kedua mungkin, apakah hari ini penyair, pelukis atau seniman di Indonesia harus berkomitmen? Karena saya kaget berkomitmen terlibat. Apakah hari ini seni dan sastra masih bisa hidup bebas dari politik atau tidak? Apalagi di Indonesia, saya kaget karena kalau ada festival di Indonesia, festival sastra, selalu terkait dengan politik. Itu jelas warna-warna dan tematik, topiknya, diskusinya selalu harus terkait dengan politik, dan itu pertanyaanku. Kira-kira kalau dalam bahasa Inggris kurang tahu ya.
Okay, well, I think they translate already. So who wants to answer first? Raisa, you want to answer first?
Saya coba menerjemahkan ulang ya tadi pertanyaannya. Sorry, what's your name again? Ananta, yes, Ananta. Pertanyaan soal kata yang hilang dan juga soal waktu. Saya ingat
ya, keterbatasan yang care udah ya. Jadi bagaimana kita melihatkan arkaik gitu. So what should we do to dengan jadi bahasa Inggris juga dengan kata-kata arkaik.
Strategi itu harus expect that. Karena di roti itu pas.
Oke, jadi saya waktu tahu kata itu arkaik, saya tuh juga bertanya-tanya kapan kata itu hilang dan dalam konteks apa dia hilang. Dan tadi waktu saya bahas soal solidaritas, kapan kata itu sampai dan dalam konteks apa kata itu sampai. Nah, sebenarnya bisa banget jadi satu riset sejarah sendiri gitu ya, kayak mengecek gitu ya terbitan-terbitan dari abad 17 mungkin, abad 16, bagaimana kata itu pernah ada, hadir dalam teks seperti apa, bersirkulasi kemana saja, dan bagaimana misalnya solidaritas itu muncul gitu. Nah, kalau ditanya apakah kata arkaik ini perlu kita hidupkan kembali, itu bukan apa ya, saya tidak bisa memberi instruksi gitu. Saya siapa sih gitu kan, bukan pemerintah gitu. Jadi apa ya, menurut saya memang penting untuk bukan menghadirkan, tapi mempertanyakan dulu gitu. Bagaimana itu hilang, apakah perlu kita mengembalikan kata itu, dan kenapa, kalau perlu kenapa. Terus soal keterbatasan, iya betul, care work itu sesuatu yang lucunya tidak terbatas ya. Kita dari kecil dirawat orang tua, waktu kita sudah besar kita merawat orang tua, itu tuh memang siklus kehidupan gitu. Dan memang saya juga kebetulan punya anak dua, juga punya dua orang tua lansia di rumah. Jadi apa ya, memang rasanya tuh nggak pernah ada jeda gitu. Kalau kerja perawatan itu ya, waktu beberapa tahun lalu waktu di MIWF Makassar International Literary Festival, kita juga sempat ngebahas soal ini gitu ya. Dan saya tuh merasa memang ya hidup tuh gitu ya, kita tanpa merawat ini hidup tuh nggak akan berlanjut gitu. Tapi benar ada lelah, ada fatigue gitu ya, ada jenuh gitu, ada muak gitu ya, kapan sih ini berakhir gitu. Tapi untuk untuk tahu gitu batasnya ya, memang mungkin kembali ke masing-masing, dan penting untuk punya jeda gitu, punya waktu bernafas, rehat. Tadi saya suka sekali waktu di sesi All Eyes on Papua, teman-teman kakak Papua tuh cerita bahwa menjadi atheist itu adalah privilege gitu, karena mereka hanya bisa berpegang sama sesuatu yang transcendent gitu, sesuatu yang di luar diri mereka gitu. Dan mungkin itu adalah cara untuk istirahat gitu. Mungkin kalau muslim kita ada waktu 5 kali sehari untuk duduk dan bersendiri dan bercerita gitu ya, untuk mendapatkan lagi gitu energi gitu ya. Jadi saya ngerasa setiap orang pasti punya cara untuk berhenti gitu, berhenti dari care work yang nggak pernah habis ini, dan mencari lagi gitu, dari mana sih saya punya kekuatan gitu. Jadi pertanyaannya mungkin pasti terbatas, semua itu pasti terbatas, tapi bagaimana kita bisa menemukan gitu, menemukan sumber-sumber yang bisa menghidupi semangat kita untuk, bukan semangat ya, tindakan merawat ini.
Jadi how care is not just about caring others but also caring about yourself, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so thank you so much. Mas Pai? Yeah.
Oh, tadi ya.
Yeah.
Then,
I think it's on. No?
Yeah, it's on. Apakah baca di situ hari ini bahaya atau enggak? Enggak tahu dan saya nggak peduli. Really, I mean, saya baca apa yang saya ingin baca. Gitu. Saya tulis apa yang saya ingin tulis. Gitu. Soal bahaya atau enggak, biarin mereka yang mikir, kan bukan kita. Gitu.
Exactly.
Tapi mungkin pertanyaan lebih serius soal ini ya, apakah festival sastra harus selalu ngomong tentang politik, ya, gitu? Apakah ini apakah ada cara lain untuk berbicara mengenai sastra? Saya kira kalau lihat kelahirannya sastra, ya terutama di Indonesia, gitu, ya memang sejak awal dia terlibat di dalam politik. Dia adalah bagian dari politik itu sendiri. Gitu. Saya nggak bisa membayangkan politik Indonesia tanpa sastra Indonesia. Gitu ya, itu satu hal. Hal lain yang nggak kalah penting, tapi bukan berarti kemudian hanya nih political text. Yang politis dari teks bukan kalau misalnya dia bilang gitu bahwa kamu harus berjuang dan seterusnya gitu ya. Jadi bukan itu soalnya, tapi kalau dia bisa menggugah ya, dan membuat kita memandang dunia secara berbeda, dia menjadi politis ya kan? Jadi bukan soal apa isinya, apakah ada pesan-pesan tersembunyi. Biasanya buku yang kayak gitu malah menjengkelkan kan gitu. Preaching terus ngajarin kita kayak ini, kita ngerti gitu ya, dunia harus begini dan seterusnya gitu ya. The act of reading itself, gitu ya, membaca sesuatu dan kemudian kita, wah, ini kayaknya cara memandang yang sangat berbeda. Nggak harus mengenai kekuasaan, nggak harus mengenai negara, tentang kehidupan sehari-hari, tentang reproduksi, tentang macam-macam hal. Itu adalah satu tindakan politik. Dan apakah bisa bikin festival yang kemudian nggak ngomongin soal-soal yang sifatnya politis? Sangat bisa, dan saya senang sekali sekarang ini belakang bicara tentang bentuk, bukan isi, ya. Dan kalau misalnya tanya sekarang gitu, gimana ya caranya ngajarin anak baca, bikin dia senang sama kata, ya, regardless of the content, gitu. Dia senang aja dulu bermain, aduh raga nih, gitu ya. Sore ini kan kita dapat gitu, sesuatu yang luar biasa banget menurut saya, gitu ya. Kita satu kata. Dan orang kalau udah mulai senang bermain dengan kata, kecintaannya terhadap sastra dengan sendirinya akan tumbuh. Itu nggak usah disuruh politik, dia akan menjadi politis dengan sendirinya. Gitu. Nggak perlu diajarin semacam. Tapi saudara, thank you for translating Khairul Anwar. Yeah, menerjemahkan.
Let's give her a big applause. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Mas Pai. Anthony, it's fun to.
Briefly. We live in a deeply political age. That's not controversial or surprising to say. And what I mean by that is that I don't wake up every morning and say, yes, I'm a Jew, yay. It's not that. I mention the question of Jewish identity just because I think we're at a moment of such profound need of a Jewish reckoning over Gaza, over Palestine. That doesn't mean that everything is about that issue alone. Obviously, non-Jews will think about that less. But overall, I think we are seeing a global wave of authoritarianism from the US to Indonesia to the UK and beyond. India, Turkey. And to not be political at that time. Now the question is, what does being political mean? I'm not involved in party politics. I'm not a member of a political party. I'm not saying people shouldn't, but that's not what I do. That to me is not what politics has to mean. Yes, we have political parties and they will be prime ministers, presidents, whatever. You can't ignore that. But that's not what being political to me means solely at all. It doesn't mean that for me or many of my friends. A lot of it is going to be engaging with the world, helping others, being empathetic, being in solidarity with, say, those who have far less than us, whether it's West Papuans or Sudanese or Palestinians. And what that means practically is going to be different. Talking about it, writing about it, investigating it, promoting the question. That's what it is for me as a journalist with a public profile. That's a choice. And the fact is that the vast majority of Western journalists do not do that. I'm not saying, therefore, aren't I fantastic? I don't mean it like that. I'm saying that many journalists do not, under the deluded belief that they need to be objective and balanced. So when they're covering, say, Israel and Palestine, they will say, well, there's two sides. We might have personal views about what is right and what is wrong, but it's up to the reader or viewer to decide. And yes, sometimes I can see that, but that's an absurd argument in a way, because if you're reporting, for example, about Nazi Germany, would you say, well, the Nazis are one view and the Jews are the other view? Like, who's to say what's right? Now, the Nazis were an opinion, but they were wrong, profoundly wrong. And I think there needs to be an unashamed position, I would argue, of journalism and political writing, of being unashamed to say what you see is the truth. Some may disagree. Of course, there are some people who would disagree. But the idea that one would not critically look at, say, Israel-Palestine or what's happening in Sudan or Papua and name who is the main perpetrator under the guise of balance is a cop-out, frankly. To not say that Israel's committing genocide because it might upset certain pro-Israel groups or my editor or whatever is a cop-out. That's the reality. Doesn't mean that there's not nuance on the Palestinian side, doesn't mean that Palestinians have never committed terrorism. I'm not saying that, they have. But the main perpetrator is Israel. It's an occupation. Call it for what it is. That to me is what means being political in my personal life and public life.
Thank you so much. That's a very strong statement for the ending. It's about siding with humanities. So thank you so much, Anthony, Raisa, and Hilmar. Let's give our big round of applause. Thank you so much. So I think this is a great last authors forum to wrap it up. So I think I can only say from the discussion today is to keep engaging with political text, be it reading it, writing it, distributing it, and keep on coming to this kind of forum, because as Raisa and Mas Fai say, mari terus nongkrong untuk bicara mengenai politik. Sekali lagi terima kasih, selamat sore.
Terima kasih kepada Mbak Syuri Maria Sigeti Tambunan, kemudian Anthony Lowenstein, Hilmar Fari, dan Raisa Kamila. Dan ini jadi percakapan penutup yang sangat dahsyat. Udah mau ditutup tapi makin dahsyat gitu ya perbincangannya. Berarti saatnya kayaknya kita perlu ngasih selamat juga untuk Jilf dan Mbak Vivi. Nanti malam akan ada closing night dan sampai jumpa di Jakarta International Literary Festival tahun depan.